Hello hockey fans, Oddman Rush here, and welcome back to another episode of Whatever Happened To, the series where we take a where are they now look at players who found success in the National Hockey League, but are no longer permanent fixtures in the league, either due to controversy, poor play, or simply rotten luck. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at a 16-year veteran of the league and a 7-time NHL All-Star, as we ask, whatever happened to Shea Weber? The 49th overall pick of the 2003 draft by the Nashville Predators, Shea Weber would spend the next 2 seasons post-draft back down in major juniors. As he rejoined the WHL's Kelowna Rockets, he scored 73 points in 115 regular season games, and he won several awards during that span, including the 2005 WHL Championship, Playoff MVP, and even the 2004 Memorial Cup too. As you might expect, these accolades would earn Weber his first pro contract in the sport, as he signed a 3-year entry-level deal with the Predators on September 14, 2004. Once his WHL career had concluded and having left the league on top, Weber would turn pro for the 05-06 season and begin the year in the minors with the Milwaukee Admirals. However, after scoring 27 points in 46 AHL games, the Canadian defenseman would receive the greatest news of his career. He had been called up to the Predators roster on January 6, 2006, and he would make his NHL debut later that day. From there, Weber would go on to spend the rest of the regular season on the Predators roster, and he would produce respectable numbers for the team, as he potted 10 points in his first 28 games in Nashville. Not exactly Calder winning numbers, of course, but a solid showing from a defenseman during his opening stint in the show. Though the Predators would make the playoffs and Weber would join the team for their brief postseason run, the former second-round pick would return to Milwaukee by the end of the year, as he would rejoin the Admirals for their playoff run and score 11 points in 14 postseason games. So despite ending the year in the AHL, Weber had played his first pro season, had spent significant time in the NHL, and he had shown that he could hold his own against the best hockey players in the world. Thanks to his strong performance in the years that followed, Weber would never return to the minors for the rest of his pro career. The 06-07 season saw Weber return to Nashville once again, join the team for their pre-season training camp, and play well enough to earn a spot on their opening night roster. From there, the former second-round draft pick would take his game to the next level and become a vital member of the team seemingly overnight, as he would register 17 goals and 40 points in 79 games during his first full year on the team. Though he would produce somewhat of a sophomore slump during the following 07-08 NHL season, since he only potted 20 points that year, he would end up playing just 54 regular season games due to a dislocated knee and a leg injury too, so he had still scored at a respectable pace given that he missed nearly half of the season schedule. Despite his various struggles with the injury bug, Weber would help Nashville reach the postseason during each of these 2 years, and while he would score 7 points in 11 total playoff games, the Predators were unable to make it out of the first round in either year. At least they made it to the dance, right guys? Once his entry-level contract had expired, and having earned a permanent spot in Nashville's top 4, both Weber and the Predators were looking to extend their partnership for the foreseeable future. This mutual interest culminated in Nashville signing Weber to a 3-year, $13.5 million contract extension worth $4.5 million a season on June 23, 2008. So thanks to his impressive play during his young NHL career, and thanks to him bouncing back from an injury-riddled season, Weber would be sticking around in Nashville for several years to come, and he had earned a significant raise in his salary in order to do so. Luckily for both the player and the organisation, this deal would work out very, very well. The next 2 years of Weber's career would see the defenseman establish himself as a top blue liner across the league, as well as a leader within the Predators' locker room too. After setting his career high in goals during the 08-09 season, and after potting 53 points in 81 games that year, the 24-year-old would earn an A on his jersey during the following 09-10 season, as he embraced a new leadership role through his willingness to defend his teammates, all while potting 16 goals and 43 points in 78 regular season games. In fact, Weber's leadership was so vital that Nashville would reward him with quite the honour, as on July 8, 2010, the Predators named Weber as the newest captain in franchise history, becoming just the 5th player to do so since Nashville's inception back in 1998. So thanks to him leading by example both on and off the ice, and thanks to his consistent play since joining the team, Weber would wear the C on his jersey for the following season, and he would become the newest captain of an NHL franchise. Given that only a few dozen players receive this honour every year, and given that many of them hold the position for numerous seasons, Weber had joined an exclusive group within the league. Having been made the captain of the Predators roster, the 10-11 NHL season would see the captain continue to register solid scoring numbers and lead by example for his team, as he potted 16 goals and 48 points in 82 games that year. Not only that, Weber's 5 points in 12 playoff games would help the Predators reach the second round of the postseason for the first time in franchise history. And while they were eventually eliminated by the Vancouver Canucks, Nashville achieving this feat for the first time in their 12-year history meant that Weber's reign had gotten off to a pretty great start. Once his 3-year contract had expired, and having reached the 40-point mark in 4 of the last 5 seasons, Weber was eager to remain in Nashville, but knew that he deserved a sizable raise for his services. Though the two sides would file for arbitration during the off-season, Nashville eventually signed Weber to a 1-year contract worth $7.5 million on August 4th, 2011. From there, the Predators captain would remain his usual self during the following 11-12 season, as he continued to lead by example as a top blue liner in the league, and he scored 19 goals and 49 points in 78 regular season games. This performance would help Nashville reach the postseason for the 6th time in 7 seasons, where Weber would score 3 points in 10 playoff games, as Nashville made it to the second round once more, only to be bested by the Phoenix Coyotes. At least they'd made some progress, right guys? After his 1-year extension had expired, and having remained the go-to guy on the Predators' back end, Weber was ready to make a lengthy commitment to an NHL organisation and sign a long-term contract in the league. Since NHL rules prevented Nashville from taking him to arbitration for a second time, on July 19th, 2012, the 27-year-old signed an offer sheet with the Philadelphia Flyers, which would have seen the defenseman join the team on a whopping 14-year, $110 million deal worth nearly $7.9 million a season. This sizable salary, coupled with the front-loaded signing bonus, which would see Weber earn $68 million during the first 6 years of the deal alone, became the richest offer sheet in NHL history, as it held more total money, more money per season, and a longer term than any other offer sheet the league had ever seen. Though Weber had signed this contract and he seemed Philadelphia bound, Nashville weren't about to let their captain say goodbye. Having recently lost Weber's defensive partner and fellow star blue liner Ryan Suter to free agency, the Predators chose to match the Flyers' offer sheet just 5 days later on July 24th, meaning that Weber would still receive this contract, but he would remain in Nashville instead of moving to Philly. Interestingly, the league would quickly change its collective bargaining agreement shortly after this ordeal to prevent teams from signing other players to similar front-loaded contracts. So it looks like Weber ended up changing the rules through little fault of his own. I mean, I wouldn't have turned down that contract, would you? So after an exciting off-season full of twists and turns, Weber had just signed one of the longest and most expensive contracts in recent league history. As he prepared to embark on year 1 of this deal, the 27-year-old knew that he had to take his game to even greater heights and prove that he was worth every penny of his shiny new contract. But first, there was a lockout. During the 2012 lockout, many NHL players would take their talents overseas and ply their trade in Europe until the season finally got underway. Weber, however, wasn't one of those players, as he didn't suit up for any other team during the opening months of the year. Given that he had just signed the contract of his career, I don't really blame him for enjoying the extra time off, you know. Once the NHL season finally began and Weber returned to the Predators, the team captain would find a way to kick his game up a notch and produce even more impressive numbers than seasons past. After potting 9 goals and 28 points in 48 games during the lockout-shortened year, the former second-round draft pick would match his career high in goals and set a new career high in points during the following 13-14 season, as he potted 23 goals and 56 points in 79 games. Despite this increased production though, Nashville were unable to reach the playoffs during this span, as they failed to clinch a postseason berth during either year of play. Having started his contract on the right foot, Weber would keep up the good work during the following 2 seasons, as he would register similar scoring numbers to years past, remain an integral piece of the Predators organisation, and he would cement his legacy as a top blue liner in the league. Though he would take a slight step backwards during the 14-15 season by potting 15 goals and 45 points in 78 games, the Canadian defenseman would return to form during the following 15-16 season, as he notched 20 goals and 51 points in 78 regular season games. His second 20-goal season in the last 3 years, and the third of his NHL career. You can understand why Weber was seen in such high regard around the league, and that's not even mentioning his slap shot. I mean, that thing could break the sound barrier. While Weber's performance would help Nashville return to the playoffs during both of these years, and while he would score 8 points in 16 games during that span, the Predators would fail to get their hands on the ultimate prize, as they were unable to make it past the second round in either year. Given that they had been around since 1998, and given that they had failed to make a single conference finals in nearly 2 decades of existence, you can see why Nashville were disappointed with these results. So even though they hadn't reached the Final Four, Weber had showed no signs of slowing down, he had proved worthy of his contract, and he seemed primed to spend his entire career with Nashville. However, the 31-year-old would soon say goodbye to the Predators organisation. During the 2016 off-season on June 29th, Nashville dropped one hell of a bombshell, as they announced that they had traded Weber to the Montreal Canadiens, in exchange for longtime Hab and fellow star defenseman PK Subban. So after being drafted by the Predators 13 years prior, after spending parts of 11 years on the team, and after serving as captain of the roster for the last 6 seasons, Shea Weber had left the only NHL team he had ever known, and he had been shipped off to Quebec. Though he would never reach the same heights as his tenure in Nashville, and though many people thought that he was already past his prime, Weber would produce quite the successful stint in the Bleu Blanc et Rouge. The 16-17 NHL season saw Weber suit up with the Habs for the very first time and look to make a strong first impression for his new team. Thankfully for both the player and the organisation, the veteran defenseman would do exactly that, as he registered 17 goals and 42 points in 78 regular season games. This production would help Montreal return to the playoffs, where Weber scored 3 points in 6 games, but the Canadiens were eliminated in the first round by the New York Rangers. Not the worst season ever, but considering that Subban and the Predators made it all the way to the 2017 Stanley Cup Finals, it certainly could have gone better, you know. Having produced a strong debut for the Habs, Weber entered the following 17-18 season eager to pick up where he left off and ready to help his side finally reach the promised land. Unfortunately though, disaster struck shortly after the season began. After playing the first 26 games of the season, and after potting 16 points during that span, the 32-year-old would be sidelined with an injury after he tore a tendon in his left foot in mid-December 2017. Though it was hoped that Weber would return to the lineup later that season, on February 22, 2018, the Canadiens announced that Weber would undergo surgery and he would miss the remainder of the year as a result. Well, that's one way to end your season, I guess. Despite last playing for the team in mid-December, and despite missing the first 2 months of the following 18-19 season due to his surgery, Weber would receive quite the prestigious honour earlier that year. On October 1st, 2018, Montreal revealed that Shea Weber had become the newest captain of the team, after former captain Max Pacioretty was traded to the Vegas Golden Knights a month prior. This achievement made Weber just the 30th captain in Habs franchise history, and it marked the second time in 4 seasons that he had worn the C on his jersey. Say what you want about his on-ice play at that point, but being named captain of 2 different NHL teams is a pretty impressive feat, especially in today's NHL. Once he recovered from his tendon surgery and he finally returned to the ice, Weber would spend the rest of that year as well as the following 19-20 season with the Habs, and though his point production would take a slight step backwards, he would remain a steady, reliable presence on the blue line, as he scored 33 points in 58 games during the 18-19 season, before notching 36 points in 65 games during the pandemic-shortened 19-20 season. Though the Habs would miss the playoffs in 2019, Weber's play would help Montreal suit up in the 2020 playoff bubble, where the defenseman potted 5 points in 10 games as the Canadiens were eliminated in the first round by the Philadelphia Flyers. Given that they were the lowest seeded team in the tournament, and given that they defeated the Pittsburgh Penguins during the qualifying round, they certainly could have done a lot worse for themselves, that's for sure. So despite a slight regression in his numbers, and him not quite being the same player that he was in seasons past, Weber had continued to lead by example for his team. He remained a steady presence on the back end, and he had brought the Habs some mild postseason success. As he prepared to enter the 9th season of his 14-year contract, the 35-year-old was eager to keep up the good work and remain an effective player during the twilight years of his career. However, the following season would end up being his last. The 2021 season saw Weber suit up in his 5th year with the Habs and join the Canadiens in the newly formed North Division. Though he would suit up in his 1000th NHL game on February 2nd, 2021, and though he would continue to lead his team in any way that he could, the defenseman would show further signs of regression, as he finished the year with 6 goals and 19 points in 48 regular season games, his lowest full-year totals since joining the league a decade and a half ago. Now, in Weber's defence, this continued descent was thanks in large part to numerous injury troubles, as the 35-year-old would be plagued with lingering ailments basically all season long. As Montreal returned to the playoffs once again, Weber would continue to play through the pain, as he remained on the Habs' top defensive pair, and he led the team in ice time throughout the postseason, despite dealing with nagging injuries. This sacrifice, coupled with his 6 points in 22 postseason games, would help Montreal make a surprise run all the way to the 2022 Stanley Cup finals. But the Canadiens would eventually fall at the final hurdle to the defending Cup champs, the Tampa Bay Lightning. Ooh, so close yet so far. So even though his body was banged up and he probably shouldn't have been playing, Weber hadn't missed a single game during the Habs' postseason run, and he had led the team to their first finals appearance in nearly 2 decades. If that's not the epitome of a locker room leader, I don't know what is. Unfortunately for Weber though, these injuries were about to take their toll. Once the playoffs concluded and the off-season began, the Canadiens would drop quite the bombshell in late July 2021, as they revealed that Shea Weber would be forced to miss the entire 21-22 season due to a number of injuries, including to his foot, ankle and knee. Not only that, it was also revealed that the extent of Weber's injuries was so bad that the defenseman might never play in the NHL ever again, as his injuries were so severe that he might be forced to retire prematurely as a result. Unfortunately for both the player and the organisation, this news would be confirmed soon after, as it was revealed that Weber had been placed on Montreal's long-term injured reserve list, and that he would remain there until the remainder of his 14-year contract was up. So after joining the Habs half a decade prior, after captaining the team for 3 seasons, and after leading them all the way to the Stanley Cup finals, Shea Weber had been forced to hang up his skates due to the severity of his numerous injuries. Not the nicest way to bow out, but at least he went down swinging, right guys? Since then, Shea Weber has spent the last 3 seasons on LTIR, where he has found his contract being bounced around between multiple teams across the league. After spending the 21-22 season on Montreal's books, the Habs would trade Weber's deal to the Vegas Golden Knights on June 16, 2022, before Vegas sent it to the Arizona Coyotes, along with a 2023 5th-round draft pick, on February 22, 2023. At the time of this recording, Weber's contract is still owned by the Coyotes, but given Arizona's reputation as the league's dumping ground, and given that this deal won't expire for another 3 seasons, I fully expect that the Coyotes will end up keeping this deal on their books until the contract's eventual conclusion in 2026. I mean, I doubt that anyone else will be willing to take that deal on, cap relief or not, you know. So we know where his contract has ended up, but what's happened to Weber himself? What has the guy been up to since his premature retirement from the league? Well, a brief Google search will likely leave you pretty empty-handed, as there has been very little reported about the former defenseman in the 2 years since his last NHL game. That said, there have been some updates, as on April 23rd, 2023, an article by Global News reported that Shea Weber recently attended the Osoyoos Desert Classic, a spring youth hockey tournament in British Columbia, where Weber served as both a coach and a mentor, alongside other former NHLers Duncan Keith and Josh Georges. When asked about coaching his kids' hockey team, Weber was quoted as saying that he was winging it and he was trying to help the kids as much as he could, while also stating that he was enjoying the experience while it lasted. So perhaps we shall see him behind an NHL bench at some point in the future. It would certainly make sense given his playing style, wouldn't it? But regardless of what he does next, there is no denying that Shea Weber produced an incredible career in the NHL. After all, in 1,038 regular season games, the Canadian defenseman scored 224 goals and 589 points, as well as 42 points in 97 playoff games too. Add to that his 7 All-Star appearances, his 2 Olympic gold medals, and his $130 million of estimated career earnings, and Weber clearly cemented his legacy as one of the top blue liners of his era. Not bad for the 49th pick of his draft class, eh, folks? And there you go. That's what happened to Shea Weber. What do you guys think about Weber's NHL career? Was it good, bad, or do you wish that he was still playing in the league to this very day? Also, is there another player you want me to look at as part of this series? Do let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear what you guys have to say. But thank you very much for watching, guys. I do hope you have enjoyed. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share, or watch some of my other videos. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye. A big thank you to Bexy93, Burned Retinas, Drew Fawcett, Houston NG, Raquel and Worthless Pieces for helping support this video via Patreon. If you too want to help support the channel a little bit further and get a shout out at the end of every future video, make sure you head over to patreon.com/oddmanrush and become a patron today.